Join me in welcoming Dr. Clete Youmans.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, like Dr. Beasley said, it was actually a teamwork between Steve, John, and I trying to get each other through college here. And John was the smartest of us all, and Steve was the hardest worker, which drove me. And that's part of my presentation today is it's a teamwork event. And so if you'll hang out with those good people, and in my case, people better than me, then maybe something good will happen to you also in the future. So let me go ahead and begin. I've got a lot of slides. I'm not going to come into a lot of commercials because BASF, who I work for, has a lot of commercials, and you can look them up yourself. But I'll talk a little bit more about it when I get there. But over all the years I've been gone, I constantly think back of being here at Auburn. And I do remember reading the Creed and what it's like. And this morning, most of you probably don't even realize it, I talked to the guy at the Auburn Hotel, the conference center, and I said, do you see these signs? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, are you a student here? And he goes, no, well, I am a student, but I said, this is the Auburn Creed. When you walk out of the restaurant, Acacia, I believe that might be pronounced, and you look at each of those little columns, that's the Auburn Creed on those columns as you walk through there. And so I think about that, and hard work for me is one of the reasons I'm here today. But I'm going to give you, maybe it's some boring things, maybe not, but I'm from Tennessee right now these days, but there's one of the old buildings still exists up there, and I'm the principal biologist now. I work in the field, but I'm going to kind of tell you a path, show you the path of how I got here over the years. And so you're saying, well, why am I here talking, and what's my connection with Auburn? So I grew up in Dothan, Alabama, and then I went to Savannah, Georgia. Well, what happened in those years right there? Because most of you weren't alive, but that's the Vietnam War. My dad worked for the civil service for the Army at the Advanced Warrant Officer Training School in Fort Rucker. So when we started putting about 500,000 people overseas in Vietnam, there had to be more airspace. So we moved to Georgia over near Savannah, where Fort Stewart is. And then later, in 1968, they came out with the Cobras, and we'd watch them dive as we were crabbing out in the marshlands and everything. But then the war ended around 72. We moved back to the Dothan area, so I ended up graduating Dothan High School, and my dad always thought I should be doing something other than goofing off. So I ended up working summer jobs like at IGA, Morrison's cafeteria. I was really good at making tartar sauce there. 150 pounds a week of tartar sauce I made at Morrison's. And then I'd take summer intern jobs, Woolfolk Chemical Works. I thought that was really high paying. I was making about $3.50 an hour then instead of the $1.25, $1.35 at these other places. So I started getting an interest in what are all these chemicals, and I was driving a forklift, 2-ton truck, delivering them, from Op to Andalusia, and going to Fort Valley, Georgia, where the headquarters was at the time. But then ended up going to college in the fall of '75, and I skipped a year because I did go to junior college down in Dothan. But in college, the classes to me were very hard, and they'd warned me biochemistry was hard, but I should have studied harder. Biochemistry and me did not get along very well. After 2 quarters, because we were on the quarter system back then, I went home. I was going to help raise some money and had a girlfriend and thought things would be better if I had some money to spend on her, I guess. But when I went back to Auburn in the fall of '76, then I got into agronomy and soils, and that's where I started kind of turning around my life. I got more focused. This is what I want to do. I met some people. Bob Dill was one that was here, I believe with SEBA, probably 40 years ago, and he really interested me in that area. But while at Auburn, also in between classes, I worked in the soils lab for about 1.5 years or 2. I also worked for a guy, Gail Buchanan. Now that guy could walk fast. And I don't know if he ever walked less than 5 miles an hour down the hallway. But he was super fast, and he meant business. And he meant too much business to a lot of people at Auburn, and that's why they said, you need to leave Auburn. So after he got to be, was he dean or higher than, in charge of the experiment stations, He left, went on to Georgia, ran their experiment stations, and eventually went up and worked for the Secretary of Agriculture and reported to him. But so I learned how some people could really work hard with Gail Buchanan. I think when he tried to move from professor to department head or the experiment stations, I believe he had over 600 papers to his credit at that time. And he still had 20-something more years to work. So I graduated in December '78. Just like Dean Patterson said this morning, why do you graduate in December? So you can come back for that football season that last fall. So I guarantee you, if you can spread it out, and like he said, all these students want to take 13 hours. I'm like, why not? You know, if I can do that a year and a half in advance, parents never know, and I can take those 2 classes in the fall, and we're going to have a good time. So that's kind of how it worked for me. I was into having a good time too a little bit. And as you might misunderstand me, this is so you can understand me. I don't pronounce words the same as some people. So I may say boundary instead of boundary. I may say, candidate. I may say everybody. If I get in a hurry, I'm not going to say the why everybody. And if I'm real, what's the temperature? Well, there's a real way to pronounce these words, and usually. And I'm not going to ask you anything, I'll ask you, so I'm right on that one. And unlike Jimmy Carter, I can say nuclear instead of nuclear. So my words are a little different pronunciation-wise because a lot of my relatives are from South Georgia. And when I go home to Valdosta and see my relatives there, it's weird. It's like they sound what I would say, people would say is country. And I realize, oh no, that's me when I go to that part of the world. All right, so where am I now? I'm out living out near the Mississippi River northwest. Tennessee's not very high north and south, 110 miles. It's a long way east and west, but I'm 10 miles from the Mississippi River, and I cover Arkansas and the Boot Hill of Missouri. And there's 2 bridges. One goes from Memphis, one from Dyersburg, crosses the Mississippi River. It's too expensive to build those big bridges across that big, long river. This is my hometown of 20,000 people. Not much different than Auburn downtown used to be 10, 15 years ago before they put up tall, apartment complexes, but very similar in size. But it's also on the edge of the Delta, and that is a cultural difference between Auburn and there. Tried to figure out what in the world is Dyersburg got, and this is it right here. If you're into motorcycles, we're the guys that build the Boss Hoss motorcycles. Their small one starts with a 650 horsepower. The next one they have is 1,050 horsepower. They will fly, but you better have some money when you go buy one. And they only make probably 50 a year. But that's the top of the line motorcycle in the world if you want to go so fast. It's unbelievable. All right, so everybody, this is my dad. So he loved fishing, and so I was down at Lake Talcott near Tallahassee, Florida, when fish were all over the place. And then that's me, because he brought me up to be a fisherman. And that's back when going to Destin had a whole different meaning than it does today. I mean, there were no hotels in Destin back then. It was just the fishing capital of Florida to go to. All right, and then I get out of school, get married. I get into all these side things going on, assistant scoutmaster, soccer coach for 17 seasons, things like that. But it's amazing when you have just a few little kids in your troop and your patrol, and now one of them's passed away, but we got another one that went to grad school at VPI. This one's a band director at Marysville, Tennessee, which would be like saying Hoover for Alabama. It's pretty big in football. This one's a banker these days. That's my son. He's in Knoxville. And this one was drum major 2 years in a row and flew around with Coach K everywhere at Duke University. So he's now working in Washington. But so I spent a lot of time. That's one thing about my job. It's flexible. That's one thing. When they sent me to school once, I made sure I answered those questions that said, what I love in life is being flexible. If I want to get my hair cut at 2 o'clock, I want to go get it cut. If I want to work till 3 a.m., I don't want the doors closed. I want to be able to walk in there and work. So flexibility is what I'm about. It allows me to do things like that. I can work from 6 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go to the swim meet, and still come home and work from 9 to 12. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. I can take off 2 weeks. Had to lose 50 pounds for this one, but go up there to Philmont and hike 70 miles in 13 days and experience things like that. I did the sea base one also for you scouts. I love the water, being brought up around water, swimming and things like that. And yeah, that's the bridge at Destin back there. So I ended up going back after 50 years, I guess. Instead of fishing, now I'm just riding around on a boat and sitting in a lawn chair out in the water. And like everybody, if you have the opportunity when you're growing up, everybody says travel while you're young. Because when you get old and your knees don't work, you don't want to travel as much. You can't cover the ground. So over the years, we did a lot of traveling. This one's there at Trevi Fountain in Rome, snow skiing trips. And I tried, you know where this is going, I tried to bring up my son right. And that's his girlfriend. Now they're married. That was 5 years before they got married. And I made the trip from Dyersburg, and Flagstaff is down in there. And I left at 2 and got there at lunchtime the next day, 22 hours later, nonstop. Ate at Cracker Barrel, went down to Sedona, spent the night. Then I went down to Phoenix to see the national championship game about 5 or 6 years ago. So actually I brought something. I was going to pull it out. And this little guy rode on the front of our truck the whole way. It's about 2,400 miles out there and back. But so somewhere I went wrong. I don't know. Dean Patterson might can help me. You know, he's got the ability to give scholarships to everybody, but maybe my son wasn't quite that smart. So he went to Tennessee, and that's the history of that. But I'm going to go back to the Auburn and point out some things. So I began school at Auburn, agronomy and soils, worked in the soils lab. Gail Buchanan graduated from Auburn. But when I did all these things, I had a path. I had a choice. After a bachelor's degree, I actually had an opportunity to go work for Duda. Well, Duda may still be there today. Back then it was super big, and it was worldwide too. But they talked about working 6 days a week down there, and I was not prepared to go work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in strawberry fields and be the assistant strawberry manager. And so Auburn sounded better at the time. So I stuck around Auburn after doing the BS. Worked for Dr. Harold Walker in soybean weed research. And a couple of the things I do remember is that in the Southern Weed Science Society, there's a weed contest for grad students, and sometimes the undergrad students get to go. But Auburn had the very first place team in 1980 over in Albany, Georgia. And other than the gnats flying into the barbecue and me being able to eat it without it bothering me and everybody else wouldn't eat the barbecue, there was like 5% of the whole competition was who can shotgun a beer the fastest. Auburn did not win, I'm sorry. Florida did. But we knew that when they said you're going to have to see how fast you can drink a beer as extra credit. And we're like, there's no way. Because all these Florida people were there, sure enough, in 2 seconds, theirs was gone and we were foaming at the mouth. So I went through that and I presented my first professional papers ever on balloon vine control with Blazer, and so that's back to the BS choice. But I had a choice then to go to Raman Haas or University of Arkansas. So I graduated from Arkansas, and that was a graduate degree, but actually, so I went to Arkansas, was a grad student out there in herbicides, worked in weed science. I also worked with soybean cyst nematodes, and my advisor was Dr. Oliver. And he did a lot of weed competition work at the time, just like Gail Buchanan had done here 20 years earlier. And I was a weed team assistant coach there, and that was the first 2 years Arkansas won, and they went on for about 25 more years to win all but 2 or 3 times. So it'd be like, football, you win everything but 2 or 3 years out of 25 years. But Arkansas's got an advantage because they do have a lot of money. And Dean Patterson could say that helps, money. And their grad students in weed science is about 18 to 20. And there's a lot of money that filters in through there. So it's a very national program. People international come there, national, all the Purdue people come there. And a lot of times different smaller graduate curriculums, it's mostly a local group or the state next door goes there. But what that does is when you've got international students and national students coming from California and everywhere to work on weed science, you get to talk to these people, and they don't think the same way you do. But for some reason, after a while, it tends to make you think more their way. So it kind of opens up your mind, your ideas as to how that works. So I did appreciate going to Arkansas. I began to study a little bit more at Arkansas. So I had a top paper. I have about 35 grad students at a huge meeting they have there. And I became the top graduate student at the University of Arkansas in the plant science program. And then in '85, I made one more presentation before I left the University of Arkansas. When I started looking for a job, Steve Bagagi called me, because I was calling them. They called me and said, hey, can you come and interview like 2 weeks from now on this day? And I said, well, I can't make it that day. And it was like 3 seconds later, they said, okay, thank you, bye. And I was just standing there on the phone going, what just happened? And so American Cyanamid had more interest. I knew some of their people, and they came in. They talked to me about leaving school earlier than what I wanted to leave, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not taking a job. And I didn't. I didn't take the job. And finally, a person came back from Cyanamid and said, look, if you stay here as a grad student and get paid what you're being paid at the time was $7,100 a year, we'll pay you 4 times as much, and we won't guarantee you a job forever, but you'll make 4 times as much pay. And they said, it won't matter to us if you have 10 years on your college resume or 10.3 years on your college resume. And so I said, okay, well, I'll leave Arkansas and work for you. But I still lived in the same place in Fayetteville and went to work that summer for American Cyanamid Company. And I want to tell you one reason I work for American Cyanamid, which doesn't exist anymore, is because I looked into their background. And if there's any Souls people here, they may know some of this. But Cyanamid, and then on down here, BASF, were both in a chase because back in the 1800s, they were predicting we might run out of food one day. And the idea was if you could get more nitrogen, rather than collect manure from downtown London and carry it to the fields to produce more crops, was there another way to get nitrogen? Cyanamid actually, jump forward. Cyanamid actually tried to set up their first plant in Muscle Shoals, but couldn't get, subsidies or whatever it takes to do that. And so they went to Canada instead and signed on with Ontario. There's a lot more water in Canada, more hydroelectric power in Canada, and to produce nitrogen so that it becomes useful, you need power. And so they went to Canada. Well, so the first calcium cyanamide was produced, and that's where the name of the company came from. And about the same time, because I'm getting into telling you an interesting story, Haber-Bosch process took off over in Germany. Now this is after, you got the Chilean, everybody's heard of the Chilean and the guano and the birds and all that down in Chile. So that was used. More valuable is gunpowder. That's why England wanted it back in the 1800s, so they could rule the oceans. But why did Germany want to have that process? It's because that's a few years before World War I. Wars aren't just started overnight, especially in there. World War I is planned in advance. We are going to build this up to where we can go to war. And so the ammonia is used for explosives, but in the long run, it's also allowed another 2 or 3 billion people to exist on the planet. So it's kind of interesting that that process became better and better over time and was very useful in producing the food we have today. All right, so American Cyanamid had all these other products. Some of you might have heard of Prowler, Thiamide, or Malathion. The ones in yellow are just during my time with the company, the ones we developed while I was in the field. And here's the path I took there. So I came out of Arkansas. I was an intern, no guarantees, 3 months. And then I moved to Tifton, Georgia. They gave me a choice, move to Louisiana, Mississippi, or Georgia. Well, I had relatives in Georgia, so I picked that one. I was familiar with peanuts, and I liked that idea too. And so I was there, and I just happened, luck comes to all of us. I was visited by two people from the office, and one of them, it wasn't even my boss, it was my boss's boss came. So, how would that feel if your boss's boss shows up to talk? And he goes, this study has to be run right. If it doesn't, you'll be the first fired, and we'll fire another 50 to 100 people after that. And I'm like, what? Well, the EPA had said the Scepter dissipation studies, and Scepter became a $300 million product a year. $300 million, that provides a lot of jobs. So the study ran right. I had a backup to the study, and they had a backup to my backup. And so the original study went well. I was taking 3-foot cores that year of samples in the ground, and actually the next year I took 1,100 samples 3 foot deep. And that gets old, thinking you got to go to the field and take 40, 50 samples a day and lose the end of a soil probe 3 feet in the ground, dig it out with a shovel, or hit the hard pan, lift the tractor up in there, and you not be able to do anything the rest of the day, just hope for a rain or something, because they're on a schedule. But that worked out pretty good, and they said, what do you want for doing it? I said, I'm glad I did it right. They go, no, we want to reward you. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, go to Brazil and work. And they said, okay, we'll ship you down there in 6 weeks. What do you want to do in Brazil? I said, I just want to work in the field and see what they do, what kind of agriculture. And so they let me ride around and work in sugar cane. I worked in soybeans. And then on weekends, they just said, we're not working. You go wherever you want. And it was neat. Anywhere I wanted to go. Went to Rio, Copacabana twice. Went to Brasilia. Went to Foz do Iguaçu, all the neat places, and saw all that. So it all comes back to, your dad or Auburn or something. It's all building up. And so it was pretty neat to go do that. And they said, well, you can run something right. Why don't you get a promotion? And that seems to be the general idea. If you can do your job you're in, maybe you can do the next one at a higher level. And so I said, yeah, well, I guess I ought to do that. Moved to New Jersey, which was kind of really low on my list of things I wanted to do. And I was not married at this time. I was about 30, 31 years old. I was too busy to get married. But so I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, and probably about a year later, I got married to a girl from the sticks in Georgia and Stockton, Georgia. And there wasn't a traffic light within 10 miles of where she lived until about 5 years ago. It was 20-something miles the other side of Valdosta going toward the Okefenokee Swamp. And every night, you got to hear this, when are we leaving? I'm like, when are we leaving? Yeah, when are we moving from here? Well, it was fine. We had the bowling clubs up there. We had softball teams. And everybody there would say, well, you can go see the Giants play and the Phillies and the 76ers. And I thought, yeah, but that takes a lot of money. And we already paid everything in the world to move up here, because we went from a $38,000 home in Tifton, Georgia, to a $110,000 condo with no parking protection on your car and no garage. And all your savings is gone. You can't save because it was so expensive. And the second week I was up there, the stock market crashed. So I don't know if you ever heard of the stock market in '87, but it was pretty bad. There were some upset people in New York City. And so by the time I left Princeton, New Jersey, I had saved no money, but I was going to go to Tennessee, because that was down south, and that was fine with me. And there was a person retiring, and I had an option to actually stay there, become a regional manager, stay there, become a herbicide discovery group leader. And all these are good titles, moving up in the right direction. You're on the ladder to success. And the other option was to move to Dyersburg, Tennessee. So I decided I could move there, and I wouldn't have to listen to when are we going to leave New Jersey every night. So that was part of the factor it played in. But so I was there 9 years and went on to Perry, and then BASF purchased Miami later. But I want to back up and just make sure So I was in Little Rock 3.5 months, established Trials of Scepter and Pursuit, and then went to be the agriculturist down in Georgia. That's where I bought the home. Everybody likes to buy furniture when they get out of college. I'm no different than anybody else. And there's the leaching studies I was talking about. A lot of cadre testing was just going on then. And when I was doing that initial cadre testing, I remember telling the company, this is going to be one of the best peanut herbicides ever. And it was about 3 years from being on the market. I said, this will make a difference for the peanut grower. And of course, they don't know that. And they're in the office. And we hope so, because we plan on selling some. So, I was glad to have a chance to work on the cadre project. And so there's back up to, up in New Jersey. I was a wild oak herbicide guy. They did not want me. This is something you should hear as a student. Not every company would do this. They did not want me to go to New Jersey and work on something I was comfortable in. They wanted me to get out of my comfort zone. They had enough faith or something in me that they would let me make mistakes. And so there was more of a learning curve to, in the long-term future, help out the company. And so I got into traveling out in this part of the world here, and that was pretty to see the Red River Valley and the Palouse and, out there around Corvallis and even parts of California around Chico, north of Sacramento. So that was really neat to travel in that area. Also got involved in herbicide resistance, and that was a really big thing. There's what's called FRAC, which is fungicide resistance, but the Herbicide Resistance Action Committee did not exist at that time. So they said I knew about as much as I needed to know about herbicides to try to see where we should go with this Herbicide Resistance Action Committee. DuPont had been claiming our product would not control one of the weeds that has become resistant. Well, the thing was, our product did not even have that weed on the label. And so I didn't like that. So that was enough energy to give me some fighting power to go, well, I'm going to stop them from saying this. So I started kind of going to the meetings DuPont was going to out west. And finally we went to Bristol, England. And I was sitting there with a guy named Homer LeBaron, and for weed scientists, that's one of like the fathers of weed science in the last 50 years, I guess. But before I went there, they said, if you come back, and there's a committee called the ALS Resistant Action Committee, you really shouldn't come back. You should just stay over there. And I think they were serious. And so they said what you need is to form a Herbicide Resistant Action Committee, because then all the companies can join in and with all their chemistries and all their modes of actions and everything like that. And sure enough, that DuPont guy wanted that ALS. That's the kind of the mode of action is ALS. And all of a sudden my blood pressure went up. And I said, no, that will not work. And Homer said, that's right, we should have it for all herbicides. And so today there's a worldwide organization that is called the HRAC, but it was actually born with about 3 or 4 people that night, mainly due to my stubbornness that I want to go back to the United States. So I had a choice. After this, what do I do? Herbicide group leader, regional manager, and I went back, as I said earlier, to Dyersburg, Tennessee, bought another home, had a son, looked down one day, and there was a rototiller blade stuck through my leg, and I yelled real loud, and I was hoping to stay alive. I knew my leg was probably gone, but then the Lord looked out after me, and I made it through that. After 6 months, I was able to walk again. But so I worked more on cadre. We were trying to mix cadre with soybeans. It never really went real well. We didn't get into genetics too much and having it become resistant. In 1994, American Home Products buys American Cyanamid Company, and that was the second largest merger at the time. Back then, today they're much bigger, like DuPont and Dow's, much bigger. But stock jumps overnight, and so then all of a sudden you're working for American Home Products before you know it. And American Cyanamid, which before had been a very diversified company of Miss Breck, Nina Ricci perfumes, Pierre Cardin, chapsticks, stress tabs, Centrum, Formica tops, and just lots of things. American Cyanamid became 100% agriculture, kind of like Monsanto is today. Just American Cyanamid was a company underneath American Home Products. What they wanted, we had a very good pharmaceutical line too. They wanted our pharmaceuticals more than anything. So, and that's what they got. And the rumor was, if you ever let profits drop much below 10%, we're going to sell you off. So this year was 94. When did Roundup Ready soybeans start to come out? Is right in here. But there was an agreement. It fell apart right here. But then when Roundup Ready soybeans came out, Pursuit and Scepter weren't near what they were and so those $300 million went below $100 million. And Pursuit was up there and it'd gone to $300 million. So both of them together were $400 million. When you lose $300 million, there's people that have to leave at that point. And so it was some tough times back in the late 90s from, just one night, they gave you a couple weeks, so they said, we're going to allow you to put everything you've done. And think of this, if you were to stay in school or whatever, put everything you've done with 1-inch margins around it and only go back 5 years. And then that's what we'll see to whether or not you keep your job. So sometimes it gets pretty tough in industry. And if those papers go to somebody you don't even know, there's only a 25-30% chance you'll be chosen because everybody's more comfortable with people they know. Probably 75% of people you know are good enough people you enjoy working with them and want them to stay on. So things were looking kind of bleak. People were starting to move around. Other companies were merging and things like that. But I just kind of stuck it out. And I was able to start working on a Clearfield wheat breeding program at the time with the University of Georgia. And so I also made a lateral transfer from Dyersburg to Perry, Georgia. The actual city was Kathleen, which is 10 miles north of Perry. And I moved down there, bought a home like I did before, continued working with Sharpen. Sharpen had just come out. Now it's on the market today as a burn down product to control mare's tail. Controls pigweed pretty good too. A little bit of residual activity. Well, March of 2000, BASF agrees to purchase AMSI. I'd only been there a few months, and then they said, well, we're not going to let you move. So I'm saying, I already put $10,000 down on a house. And then the other guy came back who was in charge and said, what's it matter? We're going to be gone anyhow. So we're going to let you go ahead and stay there for right now. So I stayed there and continued working that summer, Sharpen and Cadre. But come that end of the summer, there were more cuts in the company because now you're merging lots of people. It's just like what would happen if you and Alabama or you and the University of Georgia merged. You can make things a lot more efficient. That's what's going on here. So you get the word as to whether you're working on this date, and I was. Well, then within a month, I get a visit, and they want me to move. Well, I just moved into my house in May or June, and now I was back out there in the end of the fall. So the first house I ever built, I wasn't in but 3 months. And they wanted me to move to Memphis, and I don't want them to live in Memphis. So I wanted to move back to Dyersburg because it's out in the country. But so I became regional manager covering the eastern and southern United States. And then in 2002, we had another cutback because our herbicide sales kept going down. You got to have new products coming. The new products are what are more profitable. And the generic ones can kind of fall off and you can sell them to the other companies and work with that. But the profit's not there. And the expense to get a product to market's $100 million. So we weren't coming up with enough new products. So we were having to reduce our employment at the time. So I made it through that one. And today's title is the current title. And I work for BASF, which is today the world's largest chemical company, and will be the second largest when Dow and DuPont merge. Now, probably 20% of everything you see in this room is made from BASF products. The screens on the computers, the colors, it's just everything. But as the commercial says, we don't make the products you buy, we make them better. And that's because we're in the chemical business and they buy trainloads of the product that make this shelf, or make this screen, or make the plastic. We don't form this plastic. We just sell tank loads of the little bitty prilled pieces that you can form a telephone or a cell phone, and anything we give away has to have products that we provide. And so if it's a pen or candies or mints or whatever, we have to make sure our company has our product in that. So this looks like a decent sized building, and this is the headquarters. This is the one, if anybody in soils is interested, this is one of the first original ones that actually produced the nitrogen that saved 2 or 3 billion lives. If we get rid of that technology, we lose billions of people, and then everybody else probably fights over the food that's left. But that was the actual units that was able, at high temperature and high pressure that you studied about in soil chemistry, this is one of them. And so this was big back when you were going into World War I and the 30s, and even today it's still pretty important. But, so that's one building right there. But this is our headquarters. This is it. It's 16 square miles. We got the biggest headquarters of anything on the planet. It's 40-something thousand people work at our headquarters. So, I mean, you're talking bigger than Auburn and the university. So 40-something thousand people, and we could come over across this road too. So it's a pretty big outfit. It's around almost $80 billion in sales a year. This is North American headquarters. One of those buildings kind of like the Kasich or whatever I was in this morning, where you walk in and everything happens for you. This is our ag headquarters. This is in Limburgerhof, Germany. It's pretty decent size. And this is our North American headquarters in Research Triangle Park between Durham and Raleigh. There's about 900 people work there. And there's FUD. You might know him. That's several years. So I'm going to get into some of the trials I actually work on and some of the things I do in the field. And this is back when we were doing some of the early headline work in peanuts. And you could just see, you use a headline. Some of the other products did well, Quadris and things like that, just make your peanuts really pretty looking when you're spraying that product. Back when I covered Oklahoma, we got into some really sticky situations here, and it was scary just walking anywhere. Everything out there had thorns on it, and just some of the herbicide trials that we'd work on, some of the right-of-way, because I've put out termite trials, fire ant trials, nursery trials, turf trials. But Oklahoma had a pretty good setup on their right-of-ways and showing people how to do things. These are really people that work for the state, and they're trying to see what they need to use. And everybody's got a budget. Oklahoma City's got a bigger budget because they want to keep their highways cleaner than Stillwater or somebody else. I got into some switchgrass work for a while up near Etowah, which is near the Coy River, as you might know it. Then rice, we had New Path rice, so I worked on it from kind of the beginning. And then this is Dr. Bob Scott here. He's a professor. It's about 20 miles this side of Little Rock. And down here is Stuttgart, Arkansas. That's, the rice capital of the world. Even though the U.S. only produces 2% of the rice, I'm not sure how it gets to be rice capital of the world, but that's what they claim. Just like I think there's multiple peanut capitals of the world, aren't there? Enterprise or Dothan or somebody, or somewhere in Georgia, I think, claims one. But so this is Provisia rice, which will be on the market, we hope, in about 2 years. And there's me standing out working at water conservation. Here's some of my equipment. So I got little tiny tractors, about 23 horsepower. I can clean the alleys with a 4-foot bush hog. I got old tractors here, and I got two 1070s I can't hardly tell apart I use. An old 5410 to move things around a little bit, and a newer one here. Everybody where I live's got all the GPS, so I figured I might as well too. And it takes when you don't farm a lot, it's kind of goofy when you get in there each year and try to work that stuff, but it's nice to have. So I used that planter about 20 years, and I jumped to this one about 4 or 5 years ago, the vacuum planter, and it does really nice. We can do in-furrow treatments with it. Now I've gotten equipment I can't trailer anymore because I was really known for being highly mobile and trailering more than anybody else in the company in the United States putting out trials. But we used just have small stuff that was 8 foot wide like that. But I got a plane. Now, the reason I've got a plane is I don't like the water sitting here. and then there'll be a hill there sometimes, and I'll show you a picture of that next. Why? Because if I go to an experiment station and see this setup where there's a trial behind a trial, I know you can't trust that data. It doesn't matter if it's Georgia or Auburn or whoever or us. If I see this going on and there's a trial sitting behind a trial and it's just as pretty as can be, I know that the data may not be good. And I don't know which one's going to be bad because this is pH. But I know the yields are going to be different coming out of that thing. And so the coefficient of variation, for all you statistical people, the CV is going to be high in this thing. It's going to be somewhat odd in this one, but this one's probably going to be the best data you can get. And the professors that have been around 10 and more years, they give this to the young people, and the young people think, oh, that's just so nice of them to give us this ground to do these trials. Well, they're up here. They're in the good stuff because they know if they can get those CVs down, that's where industry wants to come and work with those people. They don't need this variation all over the place. We want to get the variation down. And so we ran bare soil rigs all over the fields where we work. So we can see the slope, the pH, organic matter. So we can try to fit these things in. And that's why I got a plane, is to occasionally take the bumps out of the road out there. And I can trailer stuff around all day long, just like everybody's got a mule and wants one. Mudmaster, I don't know if you have as many of those around here, and a Wintersteiger European combine, which is really nice. So, this is probably the most expensive piece of equipment, around $300,000 for that plot combine right there. I've got a little rice growing behind my shop in Dyersburg, but we've got 2 irrigation systems, but I just wanted to take a picture of one and a couple of trucks, pull things around with. I'll back up. You know what's odd? Is you ask people that work for you, how'd that get there? And nobody knows. You ever have that problem with equipment? I'm like, how is it? What do you mean you didn't know you hit something? Well, it wasn't me. I'm like, all right, well, yeah. Has that ever happened here? Stuff breaks, but nobody knows. It just kind of happens. So I get a lot of little chemicals, and used to people would call me, and finally they gave up, going, hey, can you send us 5 cases of Pursuit, 5 cases of this, and 100 pounds of that? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not. And because this is one of the bigger sizes I have. It's like 500 mils. It might be it. This year, now, they were sending me 1/2 mil samples of things to spray with. So now I've learned to take the little bottle and stick it on the boom and make the boom short, because every mil I can save is overage that's not counted. Well, they only give me credit for 30% overage. Well, the plots are only going to let you spray a cotton trowel 5 foot long. And so the overage will kill you when you're going 5 feet. If you go a mile spraying, the overage is nothing. It's at 1%. But if you go 5 feet, the overage is tremendous, and they don't give you enough product. So you learn to spray like turf people, in a way, some of these experimental compounds. So I got lots of little booms. I can choose one and two nozzles or whatever. So I'm the guy that gets out there and backpacks. But I have a lot of help, a lot of good. A professor from Tennessee now works for us part-time. My tech rep up in Dyersburg, this is at Milan, which that's where they hold the no-till field day each year, or every other year now. Jason Norsworthy, he's a professor research at Rice. He lives in Fayetteville, but he does work down in Stuttgart. So I've got all this good help. Dr. Boyd, they're at the University of Arkansas. And I've got Tennessee people too, and I get to travel around. And I just do this in because I get to work with turf grass too, but this stadium here is the nicest in the nation. So, and I like football because I walked on for Auburn for about a month until I got every joint bent and everything else, and I like football. But if somebody would donate $400 million to the university, Auburn University, and have a deal where Alabama would match the 400, you end up with that, $800 million. So that's why they got a nice football stadium, Oklahoma State Cowboys, I think. And there's Tennessee. So that's everybody sees on TV and they think they got one press box, but now there's one on the left, there's one on the right, and there's 100-something thousand people in between. But we used to go out here and help the turf guys here. You don't ever get credit for helping the turf guys at the university. I don't know why. But they call you in and they want you to figure out something. You go, yeah, we got this, it'll work and that. And then it becomes published 3 years later that they found this great solution to everything. So It's just aerial trials, some soybean work I was doing, showing, we sometimes want to see injury so we can tell what happens when a farmer overlaps. So, and this is more of a dicamba spray in the block and see if it starts to volatilize. So we've been doing volatility trials for 4 years. This is just showing where, I use little bottles to go out there and spray. And there's one where I put the bottle right on the end of the boom. So I have one hose coming out of a CO2, because as you get older, it gets harder to walk through the fields all day long. So you want less weight. And I learned things hanging off your shoulders don't help you at all. That's why all the backpackers know to put the weight on their hips, because it'll kill your shoulders if you're backpacking with that 3-gallon tank on your back. No, the heat, the humidity, and I have to wear Tyveks and rubber boots and rubber gloves and a respirator, and it's miserable under there. And I'm going through about 75 or 100 Tyveks a year. And so I'm trying to make it as cool as possible on me. So I'm going lightweight with little CO2 bottles tied around my waist. They're actually in a little thing here. It goes around my waist. I can do 23 bottles with one 12-ounce CO2. So that's what I do. And my helmet's in there. So what's wrong with that picture? So I didn't know this when I was at Auburn, because the turf people didn't take me out and show me turf diseases. They talked about it in class. They might have said, here's a weed, here's a crabgrass, but what we need to be doing at the university is taking students out and letting them rate these things, because you can see the disease in there. But I never knew that till 10 years after I left Auburn. And so once you see that disease there, and it just drives the turf people crazy. Well, to me, that's okay in most cases. But so we start looking at really, really fine things. Looked at a lot of water conservation out in Texas near Lubbock. We'd put some things underground, conserve water. Anybody a pathologist in here? You know what this one is? It's one of the most common diseases in corn. It's always a rectangular. It's gray leaf spot. We can increase yields 30% by one application of a fungicide. So we're looking at things because we know that in pathology the resistance is going to build up fast. So we go along and we keep looking for new products before the old ones even run out. Just showing you, untreated. It's probably got, it's got some rust in there and anthracnose, and this one's treated, but it's just not real green right there. That's out there in Stillwater, just showing. Okay, if you hadn't been to Bushland, you don't want to go, but you want to see what it looks like. So that's looking north, and that's looking south. So who wants to move to Amarillo? So, but there's a lot of corn, a lot of sorghum out there, and they got these things where somewhere out there's a dip in the ground. You can't see them hardly until you're right there on them, and you don't call them lakes or ponds or playas. They get mad if you call them a pond. Other products I work with, sheath blight and rice. We got soybeans over here. How much more time? Wrap it up. Okay, tours, rice. This is just the rice stations out in Arkansas. That's a university station. That's a USDA rice station. Limas to make your urea go further. That's back to the Provisia rice. And that's, there was an Auburn cap. So we're doing more Ingenia work. This is a tour that was here Wednesday morning. So they're all happy to have their moon pies and goo-goo clusters, because I live in Tennessee, so that's Tennessee product. So, and the ones that come from overseas, I give them other things, but I can't give certain presents to BASF people. But I give them other, like alcohol, Jack Daniels or something. Yeah, but you can't do that to people in the company, because they go tell on you. So, but I might could to you if you came and visited. All right, this just talks about volatility and things like that, and how I get into nozzle selection and clean out systems. And I was just going to say, just make sure you surround yourself with people that care as much as you do or more about what you're doing. Try to recognize the people that do well, and try to discuss the best in others instead of being negative. And you're not going to get far by yourself. So, work as a team player. Have a plan for everything, because it's going to fail. And then have a plan for that one when it does fail. And mistakes are being made every day. If not, I don't think you're working hard enough. You're too slow. Because the slowest people are the most perfect. They do everything right. You might want to work a little faster, and the faster ones work a little slower sometimes, because the fast people make most mistakes. Assume people are working harder than you because they sure think they are. Practice hard because the real time is going to be tougher. The price of victory is high. The rewards are probably higher than not doing anything at all. Just never quit working to be better. Stay focused. Whether it's studying, whatever you do, if you want to do it well, just stay focused on what you're doing. Doesn't matter for these three people. They're all going to lose because this guy knows how to play checkers. But stay focused. Are you on the right path? And that's what I talked about the whole time. Don't get off the wrong path. Sometimes it's too late to back up. So this guy's crawling out of his truck right there, if you can see him. All right. And that's the end of the creed right there. Questions?